So Sanjay, it's been a month, not a month. It's been several months since we've been here last, and I can see you've been patiently waiting to put some livestock into this tank, which you're setting up.
Right, so this tank, really, if you want the whole history of this tank, it's been set up since about last summer. Set it up with basically dead sand, not dead sand, but the sand you get in bags. It's got some bacteria in it, but then most all dead rock. So this was rock that I had laying around for a while, and before putting it in, it had been sitting dry for a long time. Wanted to basically set this tank up as a Mantipora tank only. Just want to do a species only tank.
So some green, some red.
Yeah, there's some very fancy Mantiporas coming in now, and they grow too fast for my other tank. So if you notice my big tank, there's not many Mantiporas there because they just absolutely grow really fast and take over. So I figured I could do that in here and at the same time try some different fish. So I don't usually put butterfly fish in that tank other than maybe something to eat the Aptasia. So I wanted to make this more of a, where I could put fish that would normally eat corals. Right, so Mantiporas can grow fast enough. If they ate a few, it wasn't such a big deal. So this was going to be the Mantipora and butterfly fish tank.
Okay.
So
what was going to be?
Going to be.
Okay,
right?
and maybe again.
It may be again.
Okay.
Right, so there have been a few stumbles along the way. Right, so it's been, I would say, at least 10 years since I set up a tank.
Right.
So
and we're all very familiar with
set that one up. I had not set up a tank for the last 10 years. So I was excited to do this, and I said I'll do it the way most people do it these days, right? Zero impact.
Yeah, zero impact, all-in-one setup.
All-in-one setup.
Ecotech equipment.
Right, you know. That was all working out great. So set it up. Was letting it cycle over the summer. I was gone to China, so I set it up before I left. And I said by the time I come back, tank will be cycled and things will be ready to go in there. So I came back and there's, the usual cycling things. There's stuff growing there, brown stuff that you don't really like. And
but all look reasonable.
I left the lights on, I think, for too long and too bright. And things were looking okay. So I said, it's time to move some corals over. And I moved corals over from my big tank where I'm running the tanks at full power, lighting, and I said, these corals are used to it. Put them in here, and within a few days, they all bleached.
They all bleached?
They all bleached. Every single one of them bleached.
So the Mantiporas bleached.
Right.
Then what happened?
So, I was like, okay, they bleached. So you start wondering why they bleached, and kind of brought me back to, all right, so now I understand why the trouble people have setting up new tanks. With dead rock, very low nutrients in the water, right? And then you put corals in with some bright light, and the first thing is that they bleach. And these are corals that have been living in my tank, the other tank, with lots of light. The only thing different was this was a very nutrient poor tank, right? And there wasn't enough bioload or bacteria. There was no fish in here. It was just rock that was sitting around and corals. Right? So that kind of led me to the thinking that, it's good to have some nitrates and phosphates in your tank, especially if your lighting is going to be a little bit on the high side. There is a balance between lighting, nutrients.
It's maintaining that nice
I don't know exactly what the equation is, but I've noticed that it tends to work well if you have low nutrients and if you have bright light. Your corals are going to be pale and bleached. So that was then, and then the corals started to come around slowly. In the meantime, I transferred, I guess, some ulva in here by accident, moving corals from the other tank to here. And initially started to grow, and I thought it'd go away, but it was really happy here.
so it didn't just go away.
No.
Okay.
No, pretty
so what happened next?
The tank was nothing but ulva growing in here.
Wow.
It was bright green, large fronds of ulva. It looked kind of interesting for a while. And I kind of, with all these things, I have this hypothesis that if you let the tank run,
Yeah, it'll take care of
it
itself.
burns out,
Right.
right? So whatever nutrients it was using up would kind of get consumed, but that didn't happen.
It just
Right.
kept going.
It kept going. I guess I wasn't doing water changes and so on, so it just whatever alga died, released the nutrients, they're getting reused again. There was no fish in here to eat anything, so that was the other problem. So then I added in a bunch of sea hares on Kevin Cohen's recommendation. So put some sea hares and put lots of urchins. So that's what we did. This was back in March.
Cleanup
And,
crew.
Large amounts of cleanup crew. And within about 2-3 weeks, they cleared out all the alga, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah.
So I was very excited. I said, now, this is great. I can start adding in other stuff. But then I started noticing, flagellates starting to grow. And
We've all
pretty
done
soon,
that,
the
too.
whole sand bed, all the rocks were covered with dinoflagellates. My corals that were recovering were starting to get hit again by the dinoflagellates. It kept going. And in the meantime, I tried a whole bunch of different recommendations that I got from people.
Anything work at all?
Some
or-
people said, well, you got to put hydrogen peroxide. That'll knock it off.
No,
I doubled, tripled, quadrupled the dose even of hydrogen peroxide. Nothing.
nothing.
Did that for a while, gave up on that. Some other people say, well, the problem is your tank never really cycled properly. Nitrates really were unreadable in here. There was nothing in here as far as nitrates go, or phosphates. So people suggested that I should be adding nitrates and phosphates to kind of get the tank to go through a cycle again. So I did that for a while. The dinoflagellates were really happy with the extra nitrates, and they didn't go away.
They didn't go away.
No. Kept struggling with. I gave it enough time for all
Yeah.
these treatments, right? So I'm giving them a month or more for them to take action, but really nothing happened. In the meantime, I was talking to Mike Paletta, and he had similar problems because he set up a Elos tank around the same time with dead rock, and he went through the same
Exactly
problem
the same. Mhm.
with dinoflagellates
It's
and
hard
everything else.
from a
Right.
completely
So
sterile.
he said
setup.
he put a UV sterilizer, and his went away. So I said, in the end, I'll try that too. And so I got the same UV sterilizer he had. I hooked it up, and within 3 days, they were all gone. I mean, there were some patches left, but you couldn't see them. So now the corals were really happy. The corals were starting to grow. They colored
Sand bed
up really
looked clean,
nice.
algae's
Things
gone.
looked clean. And then I'm starting looking at the corals again and go, why are there white patches on my Pontiferas? And those patches would be growing at fairly rapid rate. With my eyes, I can't really see much. So we pulled one of these Montes out and looked at it. And there were nudibranchs all over it. So I pulled out a few others, and every single Monte had these nudibranchs in there. So they came in on some of the corals I was getting in, and didn't come in from my old tank because that one still has Montes growing really well. So some of the new corals I got in, and I did treat them. I do dip them. I don't put them in QT, but I do put them through Bayer and other things. But I guess some of the eggs don't get affected and survived. And as soon as all the problems went away, the nudies
The
exploded.
nudies exploded because now they got plenty of coral to eat.
Right. So at that point, I said I'm not going to remove all the corals. I couldn't remove all of them. They were encrusting. They were growing. And I took all the rock and threw it into bleach. Completely reset all the rock. Left the sand in here.
Mm-hmm.
I put the rocks in bleach for over a week, and then took them out and let them dry out. And reset it back again about a week ago.
Oh, okay,
Right?
perfect. Well, I was going to say, because, from my perspective, it's been a timeless and perfectly cycling tank.
If you didn't know
You're
the
just
story.
setting it up, and now it feels
Right.
like after many months or a year later, you're finally ready to put some coral in
So
there.
if you didn't know the whole backstory, this would be a perfect tank set up about a month ago,
And so
cycle.
I don't know, I think you had a particularly bad string of luck there with that, but It goes to show how difficult it is for people to get into
Yeah,
the
I
hobby.
mean, I can sympathize with new people in the hobby. If I was a new hobbyist, I'd be pulling out all my remaining hair. Not much left, but it's frustrating. It's very frustrating, especially when you think about all the advice you get, and all the different advice you get. You don't know what advice to follow, and you try a whole bunch of different things. Something might work, something may not work.
So I think basically then, I mean, it sounds like if you were to do something different, it would be that you would simply have waited longer and maybe tested the waters a little bit better because of the fact that it was a sterile
Well, I don't know what you
environment.
test for,
Mhm.
because nothing was showing up in the tests, right? There's
Oh,
no
I mean,
nitrates
yeah.
and no phosphates showing up. So there's not. I think the important thing is to build up a good bioload.
Bioload.
The right kind of bacteria, not just bioload. The
Because
right
your water parameters will
kind
all
of
test
bacteria.
perfectly.
Right.
But it's not
So-
still not necessarily ready for the hard coral.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That's
So
really interesting.
That's my thinking, and having tanks that are sterile, having tanks with low nitrates and phosphates, doesn't bode well.
So patience and perseverance.
And people always ask me, how do I control algae? And nitrates and phosphates are not the only thing that will control algae. Right? I mean, I have another tank of mine, the big one, runs at high nitrates and high phosphates, but you don't see algae in there. Right? So when you have a tank like this, there's no corals in here. Corals can absorb a lot of nutrients too. And then you notice a lot of fish in that tank. I didn't have many fish in here
Mhm.
either, right? So if I had to think through this thing again differently now after looking at how things cycle with a dead rock, I think there's a whole different process.
Different process. It certainly takes
I've
time.
always started tanks with live rock. Right? And you go through that whole putrid phase of things dying in there in the beginning, and lots of ammonia and nitrate being created. But this tank had none of that.
Has none of that.
Right.
So there could, there's a battle between good and bad going
So
on the
getting
virgin territory.
getting the bacteria to grow that'll consume the nitrates, it takes a while. It takes a while.
So now that it's ready to go, and we just came today and installed some diffusers, which
Right.
particularly with this naked sand bed, and we have some before and after
Right.
videos, certainly cut down on a little bit of that color separation, which is very aggressive.
Well, yeah, I like this a lot. I mean, this was pretty aggressive before. Too many spots of blue and red dancing around, and on a white sand bed,
It's
it's
very
really
noticeable.
obvious. You don't see it much in the big tank, but here it was very, very obvious. And these have made a big difference. I mean, I can already see the difference.
So it's
I like
back
the
on.
shadows that move a little slowly as opposed to
Yeah.
really dancing at high frequencies. So that has also changed here. So it's much better, I think.
So we're back on with butterflies and
Yeah, it'll
Montevera.
get there now. So I'm going to put some Antipteras in here, just as a test, in case there's any nudibranchs that may have survived the sand.
Yeah,
I didn't remove the sand. I left the sand in here. So if there
Do
were
the eggs
any-
have a life
I have no
time
idea.
and lifespan?
I've never dealt with these nudibranchs before, and everybody I've
And hopefully
talked to
never
said-
again, right?
Yeah, hopefully never again.
Well,
But yeah.
good luck with it. I'm excited to see where it goes. It's
Yeah, me too. Finally.
certainly looks good now. That's for sure. It looks very ready for.
I was going to go
for
through
some
another
grow.
cycle here because this rock only went in a week ago.
Oh, okay.
And
So
it was all bleached. It was sitting in bleach for a while. So all the bacteria in here, Rowley's all dead. And I'm just going to let it go
let it go for a while.
until January, mid-January, and then start moving some corals in here.
And in the meantime, you've got plenty of other
Oh, yeah,
other
yeah, yeah.
tanks to
Yeah.
enjoy, which you're doing very well. So very nice.
That's the only reason I'm so patient with it.
Right, exactly. You've got a model of,
Right.
of what can be accomplished. Awesome. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time. It's always such a pleasure
All right.
to come hang out
Thanks.
with you, and really appreciate it.
Thanks for bringing my